the code talkers, the Navajo code talkers, were mentioned a few times in our history lesson. But do we know the story? Now, you've seen the movie, probably Wind Talkers. That told some, but it didn't tell you the truth, the facts, when you break it down. I'm also the co-chair of the National Congress of American Indian Veterans Committee. And I do a lot of things on the Hill, a lot of things that we fight for. In 1995, we heard that the Navajo Code Talkers were going to get a gold medal, presidential gold medal, and be recognized. And they were going to be honored. So the committee said, well, what about the other tribes? Okay, a lot of people, oh, other tribes? Yeah, there was other tribes other than the Navajo. And even guys sitting in that meeting didn't even know there were other tribes that were code talkers. Now, we started that back in 1995 to get them recognized. But during our hearings, we went, and I remember testifying in the Senate, and I brought up the fact about the code talkers. And I remember John Boehner at that time. He looked at me and he said, if we do this, we're going to have to give gold medals to the dog patrol. You're putting us down with the dogs too? And it kind of dwindled and sat until 2002, when the Navajo came to Washington, D.C. under George Bush, his son, to present the gold medal to the Navajo Code Talkers, all 27 of them. But there was only a few left. Now, as a kid, George Bush didn't even know there was other code talkers at that time. Because one of the old Navajo guys stepped up, and when Bush was going to put that medal on him, he stepped back. And Bush got a funny look. And he told him, I cannot accept this until all my other brothers, our code talkers, are recognized too. So, that set the stage. Now the Navajo, they were recognized because they took their language, their original language, and developed their own code. Even though they had their language, and the Japanese and that couldn't understand it, they still developed their own code. And that's what made them unique. Besides, there was over 450 something of them that learned that code and were sent to the Pacific. And they covered the Pacific through the war. So that's where they were at. The other 37 were in the European campaign, through Africa, through Europe, all around there. That's where they were. And there was 37 other tribes that had code talkers. Our people, the Oneida, we had 5. And we're sorry to say that all 5 have passed away before they got recognized. In 2013 is when they finally recognized all the other tribes with a congressional medal, a silver medal to the family survivors. But the Navajo were the ones. But it's ironic, because when you look back in history and what happened, what we call the boarding school era, they tried to take the language away from us. They didn't want us to be that way no more. But the code talkers started in World War I. That's where it started, in World War I. You didn't know this in the history classes in school. World War I was the code talkers. And it was Choctaw. 2 brothers in World War I were radio. And they happened to be talking to each other in their language. And the colonel at that time said, hey, what are you guys doing? Well, we're talking their language. He said, can you give numbers, coordinates like that? They said, yeah. So they did. Pretty soon he said, there's others Choctaws? Yeah. Well, they found out who they were and they started putting them around. Pretty soon one of the Choctaw guys said, hey, we know some Comanche guys over here and they speak their language. So they recruited the Comanche guys and they joined 2 different languages. So the Germans didn't understand. So there's 2 wars that went on that these tribes helped and saved because they couldn't bust the code. And so the code talkers are not just the Navajo. There's 37 other tribes that were given that honor. But too bad that they have all passed. And during the ceremony, there was only 2 of them that were left out of all those code talkers to be recognized. Some of their family members and those tribes didn't even know their grandfather was a code talker during the wars. But like we said, up until the 60s, the Indian boarding schools were still trying to take our language, still trying to teach us not to be tribal. Until late 1968 is when that come, and things finally happened. Because we were finally granted our own religion, to practice our own religion in 1968. Finally. So when you see what's going on, that's part of history you're not going to understand or know.